This is our CGT 345 final project, dev commentary. My name is Dominic Rapp, and I am a designer for this group project.
My name's Cody Lewis. I did the majority of the coding on the game.
And my name's Garcia. I did more of the enemy designing for the game.
So for this group project, we had a lot of goals that we wanted to implement for this game. We wanted to create a top-down shooter that had multiple enemies, multiple guns that we can shoot with, and a boss at the end of the level. Since we ran into multiple bugs and time constraints, we were not able to implement a lot of what we had hoped to do.
So the major setback on our game was the ability to have the doors open up once all the enemies in one room has been cleared. How it was supposed to be was you enter the room, the doors would close behind you, the enemies would spawn, you kill all the enemies, and then the doors open back up. As you see in the video that's being shown, the doors are not opening back up. So we tried to fix it. We tried for 2 weeks. Unfortunately, we did not get it fixed. But taking them out of the game, I feel like helped us out a lot because we thought of another way to kind of spawn the enemies. And it was much easier and much faster to implement to all the other rooms as well. And it also allows the player to go back to the same room that they already completed and still have enemies instead of just being like an empty room after you completed it.
Another setback would be bullet collision. The bullets from both the enemies and the players were going through walls. Another problem with the bullets would be the timing before the bullet disappeared. At first, once the bullets would get to a certain distance, it would just stop and you go left and right for a second before they would finally disappear.
Hey guys, so unfortunately we had cutbacks, and I want to speak more about the cutbacks I had with my sprites. And first, I want to talk about the enemy sprites I had. I've made several, and they just didn't fit well with our game, with our goal and our purpose for this game. And not only the enemy sprites that did make into the game, we had to cut back on the different directions we had it facing, because it didn't really go well. And there was also a problem with their bullet sprites. There was, for example, if it was like a long bullet, when it was shot, it stayed in that same horizontal direction. As you can see from our video, the bullet sprites were changed to circles because that way, when it followed the player, it works as it was supposed to be. And another cutback I want to talk about was our enemy guns. The way we have designed them, it was very detailed, and from the previous presentations we've done, you've seen our pixelated guns, but implementing it into the game was a real challenge, especially having the main character move around with it.
Another cutback that we had to do was the player guns and the player bullet sprites. We had hoped to have the player get better weapons in chests that could be found on our level, but we didn't have the time to implement it. We created a starter revolver gun that the player would start off with. Then throughout the map you can either find a pencil gun that would shoot out pencils, or an assault rifle laser gun that we decided that would have different color variations to it. We also created hearts that would represent health, that the user can also pick up and gain health after losing or taking damage from the enemies. Another cutback would be the details that we had planned to do for our floor and for our walls. We wanted to make the floor have some sort of rug on it. At first, we created a square design, and then we tried to make it into a rug, but it just looked like a pattern tile, and it didn't look like a rug at all. For the walls, we created a torch, and we had hoped to use it as some sort of lighting in our game itself. We also wanted to create a UI that showed health and number of bullets, but in the end we weren't able to get that working. We also had designs for a boss and a boss room, but we didn't have the time to implement it into our game. With all our setbacks, it might seem like we had to cut majority of our game out, but in the end, I think that our project actually comes out with a lot of triumphs that I would consider a good thing.
One of our big triumphs was switching the character movement to be from a point and click to using the WASD keys as the movement. When you start up the top-down character template, it's set towards when the cursor gets clicked, that's where the player will move. So we managed to kind of switch that around so that you use the WASD keys to move around, and where you click is where you shoot. That's where like the bullets will go. So that was a big triumph. Another one was all the different characters that we had and spawning them. Like we could actually individually spawn them at the room wherever we wanted to in the room. And another triumph was having them move towards the character at different speeds, having them spawn different bullets that do different types of damage, and having each enemy spawn its own bullets at different rates. Another triumph was having the homing missiles actually track the character, having the predator spawn the homing missiles, have them track the character no matter where he goes in the room, they'll always follow him. The homing missiles have their own kind of health, so that the character can actually damage the homing missiles themselves and destroy them before they reach the character. And if the homing missiles do reach the character, it takes out half of the character's health, so it makes those like top priority over some of the other enemies. Another triumph was having the enemies look left or right depending on where the player character was oriented, either to left or right of them. It took a whole bunch of coding to kind of get that right. We had to make it to where if the Y value was greater than or less than, then the enemies would look this way or that the other way, depending on where the player character was.
Looking back at this project, we made a lot of items for our game that wasn't used at all. Because we were so focused on trying to get our door mechanism to work, we kind of tunneled visioned and lost a lot of time only to scrap the doors in the end. We feel that if we scrapped our doors a lot sooner, we would have had more time to implement more of our goals, such as a boss, the UI, and more items since they were already created.